Hello everybody and welcome back once more to The Witcher. As you can see, I jumped back into the game for one last time because I said I would give you a little bit of a verdict on the game as a whole. And in order to have some sort of video, I loaded up an old save. Sadly, I don't have like a house or a cabin I can go to like in Mass Effect, where I made my final verdict video in Shepard's cabin. So I'm back here at the cloister of the Order of the Flaming Rose. I went to this place because it's kind of peaceful and quiet here and we won't get disturbed by any enemies. And sadly I didn't have any more saves of murky waters, or else I would have, gone to the lakeside and just stand on the shore and watch the sun go down. But I always deleted my older saves to, save up disk space. So we will have to make do with this, but I guess it's mostly me talking anyway, so it doesn't really matter where we are for this. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about the game. Now, before even starting the game, I heard very different opinions on the game. Like I said earlier, some people even suggested that I should skip it entirely because they apparently don't really like it at all. But most people were more of the opinion like, yeah, it's a good game, it has its flaws, but it's still enjoyable to play. And I'm definitely glad that I didn't skip it, because I did enjoy it a lot. I will agree that this game has quite a few flaws. However, I feel that most of the flaws are more on the, let's say, technical side of the game, whereas the strengths lie more on the artistic side of the game. And I don't know, for me personally, I think the artistic side is usually more important than the technical side, so I can see past, I don't know, bad graphics or whatever. But I'm less willing to forgive like a bad story or uninteresting characters or whatever. So while the game is not perfect, most of the issues that I have with the game are more on the technical aspect of things. So yeah, I don't know, let's just start with the technical aspects, which for the most part I thought were, well, improvable. And I guess they will get improved in the next game. Well, I gotta say though, the graphics of the game, they aren't really that bad. I mean, the game is 10 years old, and for that I think the graphics of, I don't know, the environment actually hold up pretty well. If I compare that to Dragon Age Origins, which is, I think, roughly the same age, I think it was released a year later, I think this game actually looks better in some occasions than Origins. Because it kind of has an almost open world feeling in some areas that Dragon Age Origins never had, even when you were, outside in the wilderness or whatever. You were still moving in very limited paths. It was kind of like a dungeon, except, not really a dungeon because you were outside, but the map worked like a dungeon with different, corridors and whatever. Whereas in this game you actually had like, open fields, and whatever you may think of a swamp, you could move freely through the swamp, so it was kind of like an open world setting. A small one, but you had, quite a freedom of movement there. And like I mentioned during the game, it has a day-night cycle, it has a weather system. So I think that's actually quite impressive for a game that is 10 years old, I think. And I think it really looked nice compared to its age. The one thing that I guess was not as well done were, character animations, like, facial animations. I definitely remember Dragon Age Origins being a lot smoother in that regard. So in Origins, you actually could see, when somebody was smiling or when they were happy or sad or angry. Whereas in this game, people always tended to look very same when they spoke, and they had like, body movements, but the body movements seem to be mostly random and don't really relating to whatever they were saying at the moment. So yeah, that was a little bit awkward. But the design and the graphics of the surroundings, I think I don't have anything to complain about that. It kind of added to the sort of clunky character animations that the voice acting definitely wasn't the best I've ever heard in a game, but it wasn't that astonishingly bad either. I guess Geralt's kind of monotone kind of fit his character, so that's fine. And some of the other voice actors, some were pretty bad, others were decent. But honestly, I think after a while you kind of get used to it and you don't really notice it that often anymore. But that is something, and sorry if I compare it again to Dragon Age Origins, but it kind of, lends itself to a comparison, because it's roughly the same age. I mean, the voice acting in Origins was pretty good, so compared to that, this sounds kind of amateurish at times, that's definitely true. It doesn't help that the dialogue is a little bit wonky at times, because it was translated and not originally written in English. So, but again, after a while you kind of get used to it, and you kind of accept the fact that they all talk kind of strangely. But I mean, you can probably see now why I usually play games in English, because normally English is the language they were written in, and not in my native language, German. Even though most big games get translated into German, but I always feel that, stuff usually gets lost in translation, or it just sounds odd. So I usually, prefer to play it in English. Sadly, I don't speak Polish, so I couldn't play this game in its original language. I suppose I could have used Polish voice acting and English subtitles, but I don't know if the subtitles would be any better than the actual translation. So I think it's okay that we played it in English, even though it wasn't the best performance that I've ever heard in a video game. But again, from what I've heard, this is something that will get fixed in later games, so I'm not too worried about it. And yeah, maybe a few words on the gameplay. I would say that, the gameplay outside of combat was, I don't know, okay-ish. When you went around, you looked at stuff, you talked to people, pretty, standard stuff. So, I don't really have any sort of criticism in that regard. It went relatively smoothly. One criticism, obviously, since they kinda introduced open worldish areas, I guess I could have introduced a few more possibilities to quick travel. I mean, you had in the swamp you could travel from the tower to Vizima, and you could travel between different parts of Vizima, and that was it. But the swamp itself was pretty big, and it took a while to get through it with all the random encounters and stuff. So I think if you're going to introduce huge maps, then you should also introduce a possibility to travel quickly through the map, at least once you've, explored it for the first time. Kind of like they did it in Inquisition. So you had to explore the area, and then you had, certain points where you could travel to. And in Inquisition you could actually always travel from every point of the map back to one of the camps. So I think this is a feasible system. But in this game the quick travel was, well, almost useless, because you could only use it to connect 3 different spots. I mean, realism is all nice and stuff, but sometimes there is such a thing as too much realism, so running back and forth through the swamp cost me a lot of time, actually. Which is actually, when I look at the length of the game compared to the length of my actual Let's Play, I think if I add up all the episodes of my Let's Play, I have slightly over 30 hours of gameplay that is actually shown to you, but I played for a lot longer than that. I think according to my Steam account it's like 55 hours, although that isn't very accurate because I kinda tend to tab out of the game in between recording 2 episodes. So I record 1 episode, then I just tab out of the game, do other stuff, and come back an hour later to record the next episode. So I think there are lots of hours on my Steam account that I didn't actually play. I was just tabbed out of the game. But still, I would say that I probably the overall playtime is probably more like 40 hours. So there's a good 10 hours missing in the Let's Play that I actually edited out, and it usually was running around, doing inventory management, and more running around, I suppose. And that is something that the game didn't really do that well. If you wanted to follow up on a quest, and you start a quest and then you go through the different steps, it sometimes required you a lot of backtracking and back and forth and back and forth. I guess you could make it more effective by doing like 5 quests at once, and once you're in one place, you just check off all the quests that you can do in that specific point. But for the sake of a Let's Play, I always kind of like to stick to a story in it. So if I start a quest, I kind of want to go through the quest and not do like several things at once. So it required me to do more back and forth than I probably would have needed if I had just played it for myself. But just generally speaking, I also like to stick to one quest or few quests at a time, so that I don't get too distracted from the actual story. This is something that I remember happening to me in Skyrim, where you had lots and lots of quests. So I went to one place, I don't know, I came to Whiterun, and I had like 5 quests that took place in that area. So I just ran around and checked them off my list, and at some point I didn't even know what I was doing anymore, because I was really just going through a list of quests and I kind of lost the story behind it. So I like to pick a quest and then just go through with it to the end. And in this game this just means running around a lot. But other than that, I think the gameplay as such was okay. A few too many random encounters in the swamp, for example. Which brings us to the next point, the combat system itself. Now, I will agree with the people in the comments that said that the combat is kind of clunky in this game. However, the easy difficulty is very forgiving. So, except for some minor difficulty spikes on a few occasions, I never really was in any trouble, and I kind of liked it that way. I guess I could have been able to beat the game on, I don't know, medium difficulty, but I honestly think it would have been more annoying than challenging. So I never bothered to actually increase the difficulty, especially since you can't actually increase the difficulty normally in this game. So I would have to use some weird hacking into the system files, and honestly, I was just too lazy to do that. Both to do the actual act of hacking the game to do that, and playing the game on higher difficulty, and spending even more time killing drowners or whatever. So I hope you will forgive me that I kinda just breezed through the fighting without much effort on my part. It also meant that I didn't really have to go that deep into the finer points of the combat system, I suppose. But still, let's talk about the combat for a few minutes. You may have noticed that for the most part I was just, hitting stuff with my sword. Which has 2 reasons. First of all, as you know, I'm not much of somebody who uses magic a lot in fantasy games. When I can pick my own class in a fantasy RPG, I always go for the warrior, because I just like swords and I like hitting stuff with swords. So that's what I did most of the time. And I really didn't use Geralt's signs that often. and when I did, it was mostly the art and occasionally the Igni sign. But I think it's not only just because of my preference, but also because I felt that the art was so much more useful than any of the other signs, at least on the difficulty that I'm playing. I mean, you had the Irden sign, which I think was the glyph that you can put down. I tried that once, you know, on a choke point when, you know, the Salamandra came over that little bridge. And yeah, sure, I guess it worked. It kind of repelled them, like 2 or 3 Salamanders stepped into the sign and they got, you know, thrown back by the trap. But again, I could have just used the art sign for the same effect and probably even more devastating, because it would have stunned a few of them and I could have killed them. So, not really much incentive for me to go through the trouble of putting down the sign and then luring the enemy into the sign when I could just, you know, throw an art in their faces. The other sign, the Axii, was for, you know, turning an enemy against the other enemies. Again, I can't really think of that many situations where I would have wanted to use it. Someone in the comments mentioned that I could have used it on the Professor when you were fighting Azar and the Professor, and I agree, that would have been a fun situation to use it. But other than that, I mean, is there really much point in turning a Drowner against a Drowner? I don't even know if this works all the time, or if there's some enemies are immune to it. I'm sure they are. So again, it feels like, you know, just wasted stamina to try to turn an enemy against the others if you can just use an art sign and stun them. So again, very little incentive for me to actually use that sign. And the Quen is the protective one, I believe. Yeah, I guess if the difficulty is higher and you actually, you know, get to a bad spot, then it may be useful to, you know, put up the shield. But again, if I'm surrounded by many enemies and I'm in a bit of a trouble, I can just use the art sign and stun them and throw them over, and then I can run away. It just felt that the art sign was much more useful in almost every situation, whereas the other signs were much more situational, so I never really used them. As for the crafting and potion system, I think a lot of time and energy and creativeness went into making that system, because you had lots and lots and lots of potions. But again, some of them were so specific. Like, I still can't get over the fact that you have a potion to make invisible enemies visible when there are no invisible enemies in the game. I don't know what this is all about. There are other potions, like there was one that makes your blood poisonous to vampires, because sometimes, you know, the Bruxae or Fladders, they would, you know, bite you. So if they did, they would kind of get damaged by it, I suppose, or poisoned by it. But again, this is so specific that it kind of clashes with the fact that you only have limited inventory capacity. So you can make like 15 potions and some oils and some bombs, and then your inventory is full. And then you can only use them in very specific situations. So it's just not very feasible. I guess the idea is that you know what battle is coming up, because you either already played the game or you failed the first time trying to win that battle, so you have to reload a save, and then you say, okay, I'm going to meet vampires, so let's make some vampire poison. But for a blind playthrough, carrying around all these potions, just in case you may be able to use them at some point, just isn't feasible. Plus, you can't drink that many potions at once or your toxic levels go too high, so if I'm going into a crypt with potential vampires inside, then I'm going to drink a cat potion. And maybe I'm going to drink a swallow potion, and maybe I'm going to drink a tawny owl. And then I don't really want to drink yet another potion to poison vampires, because it probably just increases your toxicity too much. So yeah, they put so much effort into the potion system, and then they limited it by, inventory capacity and other stuff. I don't know. It's not very balanced, I think. And maybe it's more useful on higher difficulties where you actually, want to have specific potions for specific battles. But I think you either have to know what's coming up to make that specific potion specifically for that battle, or you just use trial and error and, reload saves again and again until you find the right potions. And this wouldn't have been feasible for this Let's Play. So I wasn't bored by the fact that, I just could kill enemies with my sword and an occasional art sign, an occasional igni sign, and use, the very basic potions, the swallow, the toniol, and the one that could heal you instantly. That was pretty useful. But I don't think I would have really benefited from making more potions than that. So yeah, I don't know how this will get changed in the next game, but I think some of those potions could be scrapped. And I think you could even make variations of potions by, changing some ingredients, but that only makes things worse because different variations of potions don't stack with each other, so you need even more inventory space to carry different variations of the same potion. So again, they didn't really think this through completely when they made all these potions and then only gave you I don't know how many spaces in your inventory. I mean, I have one bar of potions, but if you carry around oils and bombs and stuff and the alcohol to make all these potions, I think you need at least half your inventory just for potions and alcohol. So I don't know. I wouldn't want to do that. But like I said, since the easy difficulty was pretty forgiving, I didn't really have to deal with the potion making, and I was completely fine with that. So yeah, I gotta say one thing though about the battle, the combat system. I thought the animation of, the sword play were pretty well done. I think they definitely, sent some people to study, sword fighters and see what movements they do, and then, enhance them slightly to make them a little bit over the top, but not too much. I mean, they still looked semi-realistic, but not something that you would normally see a sword fighter do. So I think the way that Geralt fought with his sword actually looked pretty good. Definitely better than in any of the Dragon Age games I've seen. So yeah, Geralt's sword fighting was nice to behold. Yeah, so that was a combat system. It was kind of there. I had no problems with it, but it wasn't really that interesting either. And like I mentioned before, all those random encounters in the swamp, for example, they were more annoying than anything else. And I mean, they even gave you an anti-Drowner talisman to repel the Drowners, but it didn't really work as intended, because the Drowners, they would still come close enough to trigger battle. So you couldn't loot stuff, you couldn't save, and you only had the option of either killing them anyway or just, running away, which is basically the exact same option that you have without the Drowner talisman. Either you kill them or you just run away. So again, they have a good idea, but they didn't really think it through to the end. So this is a bit of a problem with some of the issues with this game. But like I said, most of these issues were on the technical side. I could see past the clunky gameplay because easy difficulty was easy enough for me to play it anyway. And I could see past the less than optimal voice acting and dialogue writing, because you kind of got used to it after a while, and sometimes it actually was unintentionally funny, so I could derive some enjoyment from that actually. So instead, let's now talk about the artistic side of the game, which I think was very well done. Like just the design of the places, which I guess is partially the technical side, but the look of this game was pretty great. The towns looked amazing. I specifically like, you know, Murky Waters, the lakeside, that looked amazing. Oddly enough, they went a little bit lazy on the character design of, you know, the non-playable characters, because you had lots of twins running around, which isn't really that bad, but they even had like twins of moderately important people like Luvarden. There were like any, you know, merchant in Vizima looked like Luvarden, except with different colored clothing, I guess. And I think you had like twins of Vincent Mace. So I think at least for, you know, the more important people, they should have tried to make unique individual character models, and all the non-NPCs that were just standing around. I wouldn't have minded like all those twins, but that was a little bit lazy compared to, you know, the rest of the design of the world. But if we look at the core of the game, which is to me the story, I think this is where the game really shines, because the story is, first of all, it is very complex and I didn't really realize how much all the different threads of the story connect to each other. I think I would actually have to play the game once more to look at all the hints and look at all the details and see how they will eventually, you know, go back into one story. I mean, we had the Salamandra stuff, we had the Alvin story line, and in the end they all connected to each other, and I kind of didn't expect that, to be honest. So I am surprised and amazed by the complex nature of the story. It was kind of hard to follow at times, so I think it would be a good idea to play it again, just to experience the story again and look more closely at it. And of course you had decisions in your story. And you had those interesting little cutscenes where at times they would tell you, oh, this happened because a while ago I did this or that. So they really try to make your decisions matter within this game. I mean, and again, I'm going to compare to Dragon Age. You make a lot of decisions in Dragon Age, but very often these decisions don't actually change anything until maybe the next game. Not always, but sometimes. So that was interesting to see how your decision influenced the game itself. It's kind of funny because sometimes I feel that some decisions that seemed kind of minor when you made them had greater impact than decisions that seemed really important. Like at some point very early in the game, when you were still in the outskirts of Vizima, there was a decision on whether you fought the Scoia'tael the first time you met them, or whether you would just let them have the packages. And, you know, Garrett was like, why should I get involved in this? I mean, apparently Harren was dealing with them anyway, so why shouldn't they go and take the packages, if that's what they came here to do, and if Harren is okay with it. And apparently this caused the death of a person later in the game, and it seemed like a relatively important decision at that point, but it seemed almost irrelevant when I made it. On the other hand, a decision that seemed like really important to me, like should I bring Alvin to Triss or to Shani? I don't think that this really mattered at all in the long run, because next thing we met Alvin he was in Murky Waters and not with either Triss or Shani. And I'm going to assume that if I had given him to Triss, he would have ended up in Murky Waters anyway, simply because of the importance for the story. And I don't think I would have, fought a different person at the end of the game if I had given him to Triss. Even though the premise was, Triss will be more capable to protect him from, Salamandra and stuff, being a sorceress. But I think in the end, it doesn't really matter. So that seemed like a very important decision that didn't really had any effect on the game at large, while small decisions may have some more unforeseeable and bigger effects on the game. So that was actually kind of interesting. So they kind of mislead you into making, very trivial decisions that can have big consequences later. I actually like that. That was interesting aspect of the game. Also, I guess as far as characters are concerned, I mean, you don't have real companions in this game as you have in Dragon Age. So most of the character development that takes place is actually Geralt's character development, and that is something that I really liked about this game, because you could really shape his character by your actions. I mean, normally when you play a predetermined character in a game, he already will have like a fully developed character, but I guess I kind of used this, amnesia trick to give you more of a blank slate that you could, build your own character on. I realized there is like a defined Geralt character from the books and stuff, but I feel that the books are a matter of their own in this situation, because this is an RPG and they give you choices, so you should be able to make your character the way that you want him to be, and not just play the role that you know from the books. So I'm actually glad that I didn't read the books before, because I feel it would have compelled me to make my Geralt like the Geralt that he is in the books. And to me that would kinda defy the point of playing an RPG in the first place. So, sometimes there would be comments in the game like, no, Geralt wouldn't do this, or Geralt wouldn't do that, or Geralt would do this, and stuff like that. And I suppose they base it on, the character that Geralt was in the books, but I don't know this Geralt, and this right here is my Geralt, so he may do some things differently. And I feel that's only fair, because, like I said, it's an RPG, you make choices, so what's the point of having choices if you not make them for yourself, but only, try to pick the choices that you think would best fit the character from the books. I think that's kind of pointless. So I like that they, said we make this a blank slate, we give him amnesia, he doesn't know who he is, and you have a certain flexibility in building the character as you want it. Now I don't know how similar my Geralt ended up being the one from the book. I only know that I could have made him very different. I could have made him much more ruthless, I could have made him much more eager to killing monsters, whether they are good or not. So there was a good amount of choice that I could make for his character, and they would have influenced this identity quest, I suppose. So I guess it would be interesting to replay the game and, make Geralt a different Geralt, just to see, how this will affect the game. I am also looking forward to see how this will develop in the next two games. So I've been told that I can actually import my save game state into the next game. So I expect and I hope that at least some of the decisions that I made in this game will have some effect in the next one as well. So yeah, all things considered, while this game had its, wonky aspects, especially on the technical side, and some other minor issues like those incredibly juvenile sex trading cards, I really enjoyed the game, and I liked the story. I liked the immersiveness of the game. Um, and I'm looking forward to see how the game improves over the course of the series, since I've been told the technical issues will get hammered out and it will get smoother and the combat will get more interesting and stuff like that. So if they are able to preserve the artistic quality of this game and smoothen out the flaws of the technical side, then I think we're up to a very, very great second and third game, and I'm looking forward to that. So yeah, this is in short my opinion on the first Witcher game. Overall, I had a lot of fun playing it. I wish I wouldn't have to edit so much stuff from it, like 10 hours of gameplay to just cut out because it's not interesting to watch. It's not not exactly a testimony of greatness for a game. But all things considered, I still think it's a great game. It's worth playing if you have the patience to do it and if you have the persistence to do it, because it has some stretches where it's easy to get frustrated, especially if you're not playing on easy, I suppose. But I'm glad I did this, and I hope you enjoyed watching me play it, and I hope you enjoyed the way that I edited it to only include the most interesting stuff. And now we will see how it will continue in The Witcher 2, which will start tomorrow, Saturday, at the usual time. So I hope you will be there and join me for the continuation of this journey. So as usual, thank you for watching, and see you again next time.